Well, first of all, I belong to the tier, as Dr. Kumar said, there's a pyramid. We only count the people who have died, but there are many more who are, let's say, impaired in their personal functions, impaired in their work functions. And you will excuse me as I cough, but it is a sign of the 7 months of allergic laryngitis that I have had, which shows no signs of becoming better. Why does this happen? And the reason that this happens is that we have polluted air all year round, but particularly in winters. Look at the average in the winters. The average is somewhere in the vicinity of about 200 micrograms per cubic meter for PM 2.5, but there are peaks when on the daily average it goes up to 400, on an instantaneous average it could go to 1,000 or even more. So the first point that I want to leave you with is that there is a broad problem. It's not an episodic problem, it's a broad problem. And I think it would be useful for us to look at both what can be done during these peak incidents as well as non-peak incidents, but the non-peak incidents does not mean that we are in the clear. The non-peak incidents are also those which have heavy impact on human health and many other things. The peak pollution occurs really because of the agriculture residue burning, as it is happening now, and because of the firecrackers during Diwali. And I'll come to the numbers in a few minutes. The non-peak pollution is in Delhi because of a variety of reasons, but it's almost equal sources, which is vehicles, industries, including power plants, which use coal essentially. The biomass burnt in kitchens. There is very little biomass burnt in kitchens in Delhi itself, but in the NCR region, upwind of Delhi, we assess something of the order of 16 lakh households which burn solid biomass for cooking. And then there's, of course, road dust. These are the big things. There are other things, of course, but these are the big ones. What do we do about them? First of all, I'll walk you through some of the specific things that can be done. And what it would imply is that we have about a 45% reduction. This is not assuming 100% implementation. This is assuming that we do well in each of these areas. And it gives you a physical picture of where action is possible. If you look at pollution episodes, the first thing that I want to emphasize is that we have bad air, and then when you have agricultural burning, it stacks onto that bad air, makes us move into the emergency region instead of the very poor region as we have today. Averages are relatively low, but on the day after, you have very high pollution because of the lingering impacts of the firecrackers. And we suggest that we could dramatically reduce it along a suggestion that Diwali is celebrated in a community fashion rather than in an individual fashion. So what is it that we can do? Let's first look at transport. We have got BS6. The Bharat Standard 6 fuels and cars will come into effect from next year. It will be some time before they are in the population in large enough numbers to start making an impact. But at least that's a step in the right direction. However, we still have, other thing we are doing is in Delhi, we are retiring cars which are more than 15 years old, or we are asking them to leave Delhi, and commercial vehicles which are more than 10 years old. So, think of the numbers. 2005, well, the BS, and as far as commercial vehicles are concerned, 2009. Those are the years, 2004 and 2009, or 2005 and 2010, because we are very near to 2020. 2010 is the year that BS4 became mandatory in Delhi for cars. So the cars between 2005 and 2010 alone constitute 40% of the pollution load from the automobile sector. This is important. We believe that addressing this creates a huge impact on the pollution levels in Delhi. Obviously, BS6 will come in, but as I said, it will take time before there is an impact. The other large impact in Delhi is because of buses, even though they run on CNG. And moving to electric buses would clearly have a big impact because buses account for what, 7% of the 6% of the emissions, 4% of the emissions. So to the extent that we can move to electric buses, that is addressed as well. What is it that we can do now? We can accelerate the phase out of the pre-BS4 vehicles and instead bring in BS6 vehicles more quickly. How can this be done? Well, one is to incentivize old vehicles. But I think a far better way is if you buy a BS6 vehicle and you are junking, rubbishing, cutting the engine of an old BS4 vehicle, then you could possibly get an excise rebate on the new BS6 vehicle. We suggest that a 50% excise is useful because it's upfront money rather than money coming later, and it creates an environmental impact now because a BS4 vehicle is replaced by a BS6 vehicle. By the way, in commercial vehicles, BS4 came into existence in 2017. So we've got a large fleet. So let's start, say, with vehicles before 2013 or 2014, 5 years. More than 5 years old, the performance has gone down. That is where the sweet spot for action is. There is obviously a financial impact, and I'll come to that at the end. Now let me move to industry. There has been a very strong move by the Delhi government to close down coal use in industry and move to gas. Yet, there are still more than 2,200 industrial units in Delhi which are still not using natural gas. Not just in the Delhi, in the NCR region. So the question is, why are they not using it? We believe that there are two large issues. The first is that this gas infrastructure has not reached. Then go to Bahadurgarh. The gas infrastructure is not there. And there is an 8-year time plan. Okay, vast amount will be done in 4 years. But the whole network is built up in 8 years. So one of the issues that we need to focus is that we need to expedite the movement of gas, particularly in those industrial clusters where the emission is the most. We couldn't get this data. But I think it will be useful to carry out an analysis of how much change has occurred in the clusters, which are the clusters which are the most emitting, and take gas there the quickest. So we will need to rework this plan to have the highest impact. The second reason why industries have not moved to gas was cost competitiveness. There is both a capital cost as they move to gas, and then an operating cost as well, because using gas is more expensive than using coal. And these people fear, then will I be competitive with somebody from Coimbatore? Well, my view is that either, these people are providing employment. So either we provide a upfront subsidy to help them move to gas, or such units will have to move out of Delhi. This is a trade-off because it is the issue of incentives, so cash versus jobs. It's not a clear-cut answer, but we do need to start a debate on where is it that we would like to focus on. The third is that in many industries we note the temperature, the heating required is at relatively low or medium temperatures, which is very amenable to electric heating. Those are issues, those are places that where we should push electric heating wherever possible. We've also also had a very strong move to move brick kilns in this area to start using zigzag technology. In some states, Haryana for example, the movement has been almost complete. But in other states, for example, UP, it hasn't. This is something on which I think a great deal of effort as far as implementation and policing is concerned should be put in place. In other words, industrial sector could move and could move relatively fast if the current pressure is continued. The third is residential. Now this is an area in which I'd like to spend a couple of minutes. If you look at a map of India, a satellite map, you will see a swath, a big broad band of brown air across all of India, starting from the north, from say Haryana, all the way down to West Bengal. The largest source for this is biomass burned in households. And this is always there. The Ujjwala scheme to provide LPG to household is a good step in removing this pollution. We need to assess how effective it is. When we look at the data for the area around Delhi, the NCR region, as I was saying earlier, there are something like 1.6 million, 16 lakh households which don't have gas. Out of this, 6 lakhs, 0.6 million, are below poverty line. But approximately 1 million is above the poverty line. We need to find out why are they not using it. When we reach out to these, we find that these are people who are quote unquote transient. They don't have a permanent address. It is getting a gas connection on a residential, on a tenanted address, particularly if you are a first time mover to Delhi, or if you are a laborer, is just impossible. We need to find ways in which we can address them. The second reason why we found, and this struck a personal chord with me, people get a gas connection, but they don't get refills. Why? One, of course, is monetary reasons. It's too expensive. And that's why the smaller cylinder has come. But the other issue, so for them, I think it would be useful if a small cylinder or two small cylinders are made available during the October, November, December, January season free. This will encourage people to use gas during this season. There is a financial cost, and again, as I said, I'll come to the financial costs at the end. We also noticed that there are, ideally people use about 8 cylinders in a year. But there are a very large number of households who use between 4 and 8 cylinders a year. Why? Because we note that they're doing stacking. They're burning biomass, they're burning kerosene lamps, and they're burning LPG stoves. Why? Because there is a lack of confidence about the reliability of supply. And I remember this from my own childhood. When we moved to LPG, we also had stacking in our household till the second cylinder came. And then suddenly, we moved to 100% LPG. Providing a second cylinder to households, I think, helps in the transition much, much more than has been thought. It would be useful to provide the people who have connections with 2 cylinders so that this reliability of supply can be built up. Thermal power stations. This is something on which there is a lot of effort. Delhi, of course, the movement is there, but there are many plants which are, the Badarpur plant has been closed, but there are plants in Haryana upstream which have still not moved to the new standards. This needs to be done. Else, I believe we should be very clear and say that these plants should be closed during the winter months if they do not change over to the new and more stringent emission norms. The fear of losing 5 months of sales, I think, is a strong incentive for them to move to these more stringent measures sooner rather than later. The other thing is that particularly in Punjab and Haryana, as you know, and this comes in when we are looking at agricultural burning, if that agricultural waste is converted into briquettes and the briquettes are fed to the power stations, that reduces coal use and reduces their emissions. NTPC is now asking for supply of these biomass briquettes, but the Punjab and Haryana power stations are not. We need to get the governments of these two states to direct the power stations to procure biomass briquettes, at least to the extent of 7 to 10%, if not more, on a regular basis. Dust control. We have got dust control. Now the mechanized sweeping is there because earlier when there was manual sweeping, the dust would be raised up and it would come down again. Now there are mechanical sweepers which take it out, but it is important that this dust is then put into places from where it does not resuspend. If it is put in a landfill, it doesn't happen. Going into a construction and demolition plant, as is being done in 2 of the municipalities in Delhi, is the right way. We also notice that, and this is a survey that TERI completed recently, we also noticed that many of these mechanical sweeping machines are used suboptimally. The number of kilometers that they cover is much less than what they can actually do. Figuring out these routes is important. We also need to address issues like the diesel depot opens at 7 o'clock, so they can't work before 7 o'clock. There's no reason why they can't fill up the night before. In other words, these are logistic reasons, which can be corrected with administrative interventions. But there's also an issue of the smaller roads, where the large machines can't go in, and therefore now we have smaller machines available. We need to start procuring them so that we can go ahead and clean the smaller streets with mechanized sweeping as well. This is as far as the non-peak pollution is concerned. And peak, as I said, is because of 2 reasons: because of the agricultural burning and because of Diwali. Agricultural burning, we believe that it is important, as is being pushed right now, that as much of the agricultural residues are tilled into the soil as possible. This improves the soil quality, and farmers who used it last year are finding yields that have become better this year. This news needs to be spread. Nevertheless, it is a cost. And therefore, we also need to put into place a mechanism that this agricultural waste can be monetized so that the farmers get some money. How can we do that? As far as demand creation is concerned, and that's the second bullet, and I'll come to the first a minute later. One was those power stations we spoke about. The power stations in Punjab and Haryana need to buy these biomass briquettes. We also need to make sure that if we create power stations which are running on this paddy biomass, have must-run status and are compensated. The numbers are not very large, so it will not make a large difference as far as the cost of electricity is concerned. The key issue is gathering the biomass and briquetting it. Now, we believe that you need an intervention, maybe an agency like NAFED or HAFED, who start doing this. Because once one agency starts doing it, the demand is created, other people will replicate. We believe that biogas also has, because transporting biomass is expensive. The paddy biomass waste is expensive. So local use as biogas is important, but then we need to create the infrastructure for it. Let me now come to the last thing, which is the firecrackers on the valley. Any which way we do the numbers, we find that the pollution levels in Delhi are horrible no matter what. We introduced something called green crackers this year. We noted that their impact can be at best 30% reduction, at best. Typically it is less. We therefore now believe that we need to move to some other form. And what we are suggesting is that instead of individual firecrackers, we have community-based, just like the Shara. In the Shara, the Ramas are made on a community basis, RWA or something of that sort. My colleagues have calculated what would be a level which will keep the air quality safe, the level of emissions, the level of firecrackers that can be used so that the emission levels remain within very poor norms, right? If that is the case, then we know the total amount of firecrackers that can be used. We suggest that each RWA should be given a quota. So the total for Delhi is 1,000 tons. You divide 1,000 by the number of RWAs that you have and say this is how much you can buy. And there are a certain number of allocated shops, and they have to give a token and buy that much. And then this is done in a community fashion. Yes, this is something on which there will be resistance, there will be behavioral changes, but because I believe we are used to celebrating the Shara in a community way, because we have experienced the impact of Diwali on our lungs, a good campaign can help us move in this direction. I put this idea out for discussion. There can be 10 other ideas, but I think we need to start discussing how we reduce the amount of firecrackers in Delhi to about 1/5 of what we use now. The last thing that I would like to do is to assess the costs. Now, in our calculation, and believe you me, these are at the moment not the final numbers, we see that the one-time costs would be somewhere in the vicinity of about 3,000 crores, and the annual expenditure in addition to this for a 5-year period would be in the 1,000 crores a year range. Sorry, 1,000 plus 4,000 for the, if we go for 50% reduction in excise duty. So 6,000 a year. We believe that a 5-year period would be adequate to make the transition to the cleaner forms. The challenge is, where will this money come from? We suggest that this money could be raised through green bonds. Once the money is raised, there is some money which would be required to be given as incentives and subsidies. And there will be other money which could be provided, for example, to the industries that are switching over as commercial loans. We can also provide a moratorium to the people who take loans. The initial monies, which are incentives, are paid back by the state governments and the government of India early on. So the early bond repayment is paid by the state and the central government, and in the later periods, the repayment is made from the returns that we get from the loans that were made. We believe that we should do this in a polluter-pays principle, but also this is a common but differentiated responsibility. Everybody is responsible, everybody has to act. Those who are responsible for the pollution have to do more, but everybody has to do something. Consequently, we believe that we could have a formula in which the states of Punjab and Haryana, where the vast amount of the peak pollution occurs, bear a greater amount, and the state of Delhi, which is the place where all of it ends, but where some of the pollution also is generated, has a slightly smaller share. Again, this is a political issue. It needs to be discussed, and again, I put it out in the open whether we need a instrument to look at the intervention that would finance the interventions to look at our air quality. I know that this has been a very large set of actions that we have suggested, but the point is that we need multiple actions. We don't have a single magic bullet. The pollution in Delhi is because of a variety of reasons, and we need to address all those reasons as we move ahead and can get advantage of the more than 40% reduction in pollution that is eminently possible from these actions. I thank you for your attention.